Hi, everybody. I'm Graham Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the Independent Institute in Oakland, California. And I'm here with our Senior Vice President, Mary Theroux. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Graham.
We're glad to meet with our friends around the country. We realize that many of our friends may be aware of what's happening in California, and which has implications for the rest of the country, too. We're all dealing, of course, with the coronavirus epidemic and all the related circumstances. People may wonder why we're sitting here in your dining room, Mary.
Well, we're sheltering in place. It's been ordered starting at midnight yesterday. So we're all working remotely.
Exactly. We can't go to the office because the county executives and mayors in Northern California have issued this order requiring most non-essential businesses to shut down. And we think the Independent Institute is essential.
Yes, liberty fighting is completely essential, but we are able to work from anywhere, so we're continuing to fully function.
So here we are, because we're complying with this order, but boy, do we have a lot of questions about it. I mean, the order itself, you may have heard about in the news, and if you're local, you've heard it very directly. If not, you've heard it in media reports. It seems that these county executives and mayors have ordered what they're calling a shelter in place, which means that we can't go to work ourselves, and other non-essential businesses are shut down too. People are still able to go to the supermarket, pharmacy, gas station, and so forth.
Right, and New York is now considering it, and I suspect that this may just be the first of many places that has this experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're probably on the cutting edge of it. And most worrisome, I just read this morning in the news how Governor Newsom of California has been commenting to the press that he needs to alert the National Guard because, as he said, we have the ability to do martial law if we feel the necessity to do so.
Which is a complete reversal. A couple of days ago, sort of as pushback to President Trump, he was saying, we would never do martial law. So
right, it's kind of standard.
Never say never.
Never say never. So I wanted to talk with you, Mary, today because you just published on our Beacon blog at independent.org a pretty powerful piece called Fear, the Fuel of Government Power. And so in a moment, I want to ask you to comment on that a bit. But before we quite get into your piece, I'm thinking about the fact that the people who are now urging us to this high degree of sort of compliance with government authority are the same people who seem not to enforce other laws that they don't like.
That's right. So the Bay Area is homelessness central, and we have a housing crisis because of their policies. And we have Prop 47, which makes property crimes not illegal.
Exactly. And moreover, when they don't like the death penalty, they don't enforce that. And when Antifa is protesting, they sometimes order the police to stand down from enforcing the law. Mm-hmm. So, we have questions about whether the commitment to lawfulness is really as deep as it appears to be. That's sort of on the side. Maybe that's a quibble. But the deeper issue is I wonder whether the focus on government response is the right response. For example, the CDC was in the saddle at the start of our national response to the crisis, but I'm not sure they did the best job.
Well, the CDC, as you know, the United States was in the wonderful position of having months' warning that it was coming. The CDC completely squandered that early warning by, instead of adopting one of the proven tests that's being utilized elsewhere, they spent the time developing their very own special test. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, and they can't produce it in sufficient supplies to roll out wide-scale testing, which in countries such as South Korea has been shown to be the most effective means of fighting this.
And I think until recently, the rules prevented private companies from testing and developing and manufacturing. Isn't that right?
Right, but now they are allowed to now, but it certainly should have been way before that.
The South Koreans set a much better example because they set their private enterprises free to work on this, and they got way ahead of the curve.
A private biotech company in South Korea developed a test within 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. They then rolled it out to 4 companies that could produce it. And it's widely available, and they have over 600 testing sites all over the country. You get results back within hours, and they're doing very, very targeted communications to people of where cases have been found and urging all of the immediate residents to get tested. They give them an address to get tested, and again, they give them the results within hours.
And that's because they set their own private companies free to do it, whereas we held ours back.
Right, exactly.
And now ours have been held back. I guess they're being released a bit from these constrictions. The general principle seems to be that we held, in the United States, we held back our private companies from producing this kind of test and manufacturing it. And now that we're in a deeper crisis, it seems that instead of reconsidering, many Americans are thinking that now this is the time to have even more government and bureaucratic control. If some bureaucratic control failed, then have more. Seems to be the message. And this is kind of a deeper issue. You said that there is a kind of dynamic of fear that lies behind this phenomenon. What did you mean by that in your piece?
Well, this, of course, is built into independence DNA. This is book Crisis in Leviathan was a collaboration between our founder David Theroux and Robert Higgs, published in 1987, but certainly more relevant than ever. In it, Bob traces the history in the United States of government growth through crises. So starting in the Civil War, when the government expanded into things that had nothing to do with the war, and through the modern era. Of course, the sort of granddaddy of them all was post 9/11 America. On September 11th, the Independent Institute posted a statement on our website, certainly expressing condolences to the victims, but warning that the attacks not be used as an excuse to expand government into other areas, which completely went unheeded.
Whenever there's a apparent need for mass mobilization, the government does so, but takes advantage of the situation and ramps up its degree of control.
Well, first the government either creates or exacerbates a crisis, and then they step forward and say, we're the ones who can solve this crisis.
Right, and that happened under a Republican presidential administration.
Yes, the federal government quadrupled under George W.
I thought the
Bush.
Republicans were the party of small government.
That's not so much.
Right, and so now we're facing, a similar situation. Many people are saying, like people associated with Bernie Sanders are telling us now, this is the moment Medicare for all is even more necessary than before.
Well, and again, the CDC model is showing us why Medicare for all would not work. It's a monopolized system. The CDC, acting in its monopoly power, single provider, failed to provide.
So if you like the way the CDC handled the beginnings of this crisis, then you'll love the way Medicare for all would totally shut us down.
Yeah, we would be without care and dying as we waited for care.
We need to think a little bit about how ordinary people can respond to all of this. Is it really necessary for people to turn to bureaucrats to orchestrate their response?
Absolutely not, and people were already taking appropriate measures. The private sports leagues had canceled their events, which cost them a lot of money, but they recognized needed to be done. There were many people, the at-risk populations were starting to quarantine themselves. And what is really needed is good information about what helps and what doesn't help. And neighborhoods were getting together and offering help for those residents who are quarantined.
It's really a wonderful phenomenon.
So there was a lot of, again, spontaneous order occurring to take care of the problem. And now government has stepped in. They've shut it down, and destroying the American economy is going to be a worse outcome, could kill and certainly harm far more than a reasoned response and individual action on the virus itself.
Well, no matter what federal and state governments do, it seems to me that the best thing for ordinary citizens to do is to continue what they were already doing, namely helping one another, being responsible, being careful not to put themselves in a position to get infection headed toward vulnerable people like the older citizens and so forth. All of that should continue. I mean, probably Americans will pull through this, in spite of what the government does, by helping one another.
I certainly hope so, Graham. The problem is, as we saw with 9/11 and the government response after 9/11, the American culture was changed immeasurably from what we had been before.
It was.
And I'm afraid that this is going to happen again with this crisis, and this massive panic and fear is certainly un-American. So we really have to encourage people to, again, understand the power
Right.
of private individuals and private institutions to work together
Right. Exactly.
in doing this, and reverse the narrative that we're hearing from the mainstream media and our government rulers who would like us to think that we have to turn to them for the solution when in fact they are not here to help us.
So basically, we want to encourage our friends around the country not to give in to fear, first of all, and especially not to let fear become an excuse for the growth of state and bureaucratic power in ways that are just not helpful and not necessary. Get the word out to one another. Think more carefully. Don't be bullied into supporting vast extensions of bureaucratic control that aren't really going to solve the problem and may indeed make things worse.
Indeed.
Can they turn to the Independent Institute for resources?
Well, we're posting as much as we can and new things every day, both on the Independent Institute's website and our Catalyst website, where younger people write. We have a colleague who just returned from Taiwan and was sharing with us how Taiwan is responding to this crisis, which is, since they've been through SARS, they're now prepared for this. So entering any public place, any store, etc., they have sensors to tell if somebody has a fever. There's sanitizers everywhere. He reports that subways are full.
Yeah,
people are safe. If anybody does have a cough, they prudently wear a mask, as do others in situations such as subways. But everything's open, everything's going well, and they do not have a crisis there.
You know, I suspect some of our economists on our Independent Institute team would have something to say about the proposed new measures in Washington, which really amount to dramatic federal stimulus policies.
No, this is a complete atom bomb on the American economy.
If we could persuade our influential public figures to back down from turning to kind of de facto socialist control in response to this, we'd probably be way better off than if we let our current leaders push free money for all, dramatic stimulus, massive expansion of the debt. These things are probably going to come back to bite us.
Absolutely.
So let's stand together for the right things. Turn to Independent Institute for information on our website. It's always worth going back to the classic by Bob Higgs, Crisis in Leviathan. Gives you kind of like the underlying structure of this phenomenon that we're dealing with. And keep your chin up, and we're with you. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you, Graham.